Over the course of the next 2 weeks, we're going to start talking about verbs and their complements. Verbs should be review. The complements part might be a little bit new, but we have been talking about those as we do sentence analysis. So we really have seen all of these. We're just kind of putting them all together. And so you'll see that complements has an E in it. We're not talking about compliments like Mrs. Culleton, your hair looks nice today. We're talking about a complement, and we'll talk about a little mnemonic that will help us remember that when we get to those. We're going to start, though, by doing a little review of verbs. There are 3 different kinds of verbs that we need to talk about. So this was the first page you were supposed to glue into your interactive notebook or in your journal in the back, because these are words you're going to really need to learn. There are 18 linking verbs and there are 23 helping verbs. They have very specific jobs that we're going to talk about, but what's confusing about them is that you'll see that there's a little overlap here, where 8 can be used as a linking verb or as a helping verb, and quite honestly, they could also be action verbs. It really depends on the context of the sentence. So we really have to look at how we analyze sentences to figure that out. And you'll see that our mnemonic that helps us remember these 5 of our linking verbs is grabs, grow, remain, appear, become, seem. And then we have 5 that go with our senses. And we're looking at how does something look, how does it feel, how does it smell, how does it sound, and how does it taste. And then we have these other helping verbs that I like to chunk into groups of 3. They go with our tenses, has, have, had, do, does, did, may, might, must, all begin with the same letter here when we look at those chunks. Could, should, would, all rhyme. And then we've got this little group of randoms, can, shall, and will. So we're going to start by just talking about the difference between an action and a linking verb. So if you have the notes printed off or in your notebook, you're going to fill in these blanks. Otherwise, you're going to have to pause the screencast and take the notes as you go. So whenever we label a verb in a sentence, when we're doing our sentence analysis, when we're trying to figure out the complements, when we're trying to figure out the type of sentence, if it's simple or compound, we only labeled verbs in one of 2 ways. It's either an action verb or it's a linking verb. And we'll talk about helping verbs, how helping verbs play into this later, but we would never ever label a helping verb in a sentence. It's either action or linking. So an action verb is a verb that shows the action of the subject of the sentence. And this is going to really be important as we start looking at who's doing this action. The subject is doing the action, then it's an action verb. And there are really too many to memorize. What I'm going to ask you to do is write down some of your membeing verbs, because these are verbs that we want to start implementing into our vocabulary. So I went through and I found a bunch of different verbs that were on the membeing list. Adapt, abolish, absolve, embellish. These are great, vivid action verbs that show what the subject could be doing. Then we have these verbs called linking verbs, and those are the verbs that we just put on the left side of our Venn diagram. A linking verb is a verb that links a noun or adjective back to the subject of the sentence. And we've called these predicate adjectives and predicate nouns. And again, this link is important. It takes that noun and goes back to the subject, or it takes that adjective and goes back and describes the subject. And there are 18 of them, and I want you to write them down again. I know you have them already on your graphic organizer, but our goal here is to learn them. So we've got the first 8, am, is, are, was and were, and then be, being, been. And then we've got 5 that go with grabs, grow, remain, appear, become, and seem. And then we have 5 that go with our 5 senses. And we think about describing, those are always going to be predicate adjectives, linking back predicate adjectives, how something looks, how it smells, how it feels, how it sounds, and how it tastes. Now, something to note about all of these verbs, they can be shown in different tenses. So I don't have like all the different forms of grow. Grow could be grow or grows or grew. Remain, remains, remained. Appear, appears, appeared. Become, becomes, became. or seem, seems, or seemed. So they're different forms of the same verb. I always like to think about it in its base form. But when we start looking at sentences, you need to make sure that grow might not be on your list when you look at it, but you know that grew might not be on your list, but you know that it's a form of grow. And so it does count as a linking verb. Something else to notice is that some of these verbs can also be action verbs. When I talk about look, if I'm describing how something looks, that looks pretty, then that's a linking verb. But if I'm talking about something using its eyeballs, like Mrs. Culleton looked at the computer, and I'm actually doing the action of looking, or Mrs. Culleton smelled the roses, and I actually use my nose and do that action. So we really, again, have to think about how words are used in a sentence to determine whether or not it's linking or action. Okay, and so in class we'll go over some of these examples, but we look at the sentence, the leaves fell from the trees. Fell is the verb. I want to know, is it action or linking? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is look on my list of linking verbs. Is fell a linking verb? And I know that it could be fall or falls or fell. And when I look at my linking verbs list, there is no word like that. So I know that this is an action verb. In our next example sentence, the leaves are beautiful. Are is the verb. I'm going to look at my linking verbs list. Is it on our list? Am is and are. It is. The leaves are, and it's describing how the leaves look. They're beautiful. So now I know this is a linking verb. So this is just a little recap video. We're going to go over this together in class, but in studying or you don't understand it, this is a good video to watch, or if you were absent. So good luck with linking and action verbs.